Hello, Phil. It's good to see you again. We spoke a while ago up in Durness, recorded an interview that was absolutely fascinating. A lot of people enjoyed watching that. So it's good to have this opportunity to talk about some different things this time. I mean, last time we talked a bit about your life.
I'm always happy talking to you.
Excellent. We talked about your life story last time, which was absolutely fascinating. But I was thinking this time, could you tell us a bit about your sort of intellectual journey, how your attitudes and views developed over, well, what length of time? I don't know.
Sure.
Where did it all start?
I think I was always a very mixed bag, so to speak. And relatively early on, I had unusual hobbies because I was a makeup artist and I was into weird kinds of movies, like horror movies and things like that. And through certain friends of my brother who listened to a certain kind of music, like Marilyn Manson and Gothic music, I started to go down a little bit the punk, alternative, and Gothic route.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite interesting because I was always a very spiritual person. So there was, and I'm not saying that most Gothic people are not spiritual. I mean, you have the Gothics that are kind of like more on the Satanist side, but you actually have quite a few that are on the Christian side as well. You'd be surprised how many there are. And there was always a schism between my very liberal attitudes and lifestyles and I would say my spiritual attitudes. And I actually always made jokes about the fact that I look really freaky and really weird, but I didn't drink alcohol. I didn't take drugs. I was very much against drugs. I was celebratory, so I didn't actually have sex with people. But the people that I engaged with were the polar opposite, which wasn't actually a big issue for me. I was just like the unusual person there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I joined the military, it was very similar. I was a really good soldier, but in my free time, I looked like Marilyn Manson. And I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, and all of this, which was quite unusual in the military. So I was used to being different. What I didn't realize is back then that I was actually a conservative in a lot of ways. And because I almost exclusively dealt with very liberal friends and in very liberal circles, I didn't realize it, even though most of the attitudes or a lot of the attitudes within these liberal circles, they didn't feel right to me. And I started criticizing them. So for example, when in the LGBT and the gay community, I really started criticizing a lot of things in the community, but I thought I could change something from within.
So just going back to the time when you had some quite conservative values, but whether some elements of your lifestyle would be seen as very unconservative.
Yes.
What did you think at that stage about people who were the standard conservatives? So, straight on the rails in every way type thing.
I was always surprised and almost shocked how understanding and tolerant they were towards people that were different. It was a tolerance that I didn't see in the same amount within these minority groups towards the majority.
Mm-hmm.
And I always found, for example, family values or like close-knit families, I always found them very beautiful, and there was nothing in me that would criticize them, even though, so for example, committed relationships and stuff like that, I questioned that for a while, and I think there is a part in me that still understands different lifestyles, but I always saw the deep value in traditional family structures, and I think there was always something in me that wanted to protect them, and thought that this is how it should be in some ways.
Hmm.
But in every society there are norms, and then there are other versions or abnormalities, and I think every society needs that, but the abnormalities should not become the norms, because that leads to destabilization of society. And because I was so much part of the abnormalities, I let's say I focused more on that part of society. But in the last couple of years, and that got stronger and stronger, I realized that the norms really need to be defended now, because they're more and more eroded. And if you can't have normalities, then there is no society left
Yeah.
where the the artists and the ones the weirdos can actually do their thing.
Yeah. I mean, you use the term abnormal. I mean,
Yeah.
some people would take great exception to that. I mean, you could talk about the culture and subcultures. Would that capture some of what you meant, or would you definitely want to
Yeah.
go the whole hog and talk about normal and abnormal?
Well, okay, let's not say abnormal, let's say not normal, because back in the days in the 90s, like the minority groups, especially punk and gothic, we didn't want to be normal. Nobody, like, there was nothing desirable as a subculture to be normal. But I feel now the subcultures want to be the norm. The non-binary people want to be the norm, and that's not what the subcultures wanted in the 90s, at least not how I saw them. They actually wanted to distance themselves from society a little bit more, and now it feels like they want to co-opt society, and they want to put their lifestyle choices onto everybody else, and that won't function. And I think it's incredibly dangerous and can destroy the structure and the soul, the fabric of society.
But where does that drive come from, do you think? Like you say, I mean, was there a time when all people wanted was just to be left alone to get on to make their own decisions? Whereas now, as you say, there's this drive for universal, not just acceptance, universal affirmation and sort of promotion of an ideology. How did that shift happen? Was it politically driven, or?
Absolutely. I think there was a huge change from the political, from the personal to the political. In the past, subcultures were more personal. Maybe they were an attack on the mainstream and on the status quo, but I don't think that in the past the subcultures wanted to co-opt or infiltrate the mainstream to an extent that it happens now, and it's very clearly political. I don't have a problem with individuals that do their thing. I think that's great. Everybody should be allowed to do their thing, but this political movement of changing society, it's to me, it's a social experiment that is forced upon the majority of people. They don't know it yet. It's happening in schools, and you do a lot of videos about it, and I think it's cultural brainwashing. And
What's the objective, do you think?
the destruction of norms. And
for what purpose?
That's a very good question. I would think that goes into conspiracy theories, and I heard different people coming up with different ideas. Some people say it's very intentional, and that could be true, but I think it could also be an evolution of, like, you had different civil rights movements. You had the Black civil rights movement, you had the gay movement, you had the women liberation movements, and all these movements, they were there for a very good reason. But there were obviously political aspects of these movements that continued, and I would say, and in each one of these movements, there was, I would say, an agenda, a political agenda that went beyond equality and had a strong focus on destruction of, let's say, the Western status quo. And I think if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, they are looking for an utopia where everybody's the same and everything's hunky-dory and there is no violence. And they think if we just destroy patriarchy and if we destroy capitalism and all of that, something beautiful will bloom out of it.
Yeah, that's what I say to think. Some people think in this way. You could describe them as revolutionaries. Others, they may not be like revolutionaries, but they want extremely radical change in society. And part of the method to help people to see that that's necessary is to be finding lots of injustices like this that need to be solved, that the government needs to step in to solve. So they want to denigrate society and its history and its values in order for people to feel motivated, to basically throw it overboard and start from scratch and build something on their own design. And that's very definitely the case. Now, here's the interesting thing I've been thinking about recently. If you think about, say, politicians in Scotland, think about, say, a Nicola Sturgeon, who would pursue all the issues that would be pushing in this direction. Is that really what she's thinking? Or is she influenced by people that she doesn't really understand what their agenda is?
I think they're, and that's where I would move away from the, let's say, conspiracy theories. I don't know where that movement came from towards this like super inclusiveness, this almost destructive inclusiveness. But I think because it has been in schools and in academia and in media for such a long time, I think people do think that's the right way forward. They can't see that excessive inclusiveness is like excessive growth. So we would say that if something grows and everything is alive, that's a good thing, but actually that's cancer. Like there needs to be counterbalances of traditionalism and conservatism. Then always needs to be new ideas, but these ideas need to be held back and slowed down by traditional values. I'm not saying that we should go back in time, and I'm not saying that everything in the past was good, but throwing the baby out with the bathwater is definitely not the way forward. And I think that Nicola Sturgeon is blinded, like giving her the benefit of the doubt. I think she's blinded by a couple of things. The first thing is independence. She can't see anything beyond independence, and I think she would gladly ruin the country in the pursuit of independence. The next thing is her womanhood. She is such a clearly radical feminist that she cannot see the suffering of man. So she will do anything for women, even if it might hurt women in the pursuit. And I don't know if I can blame her for that, because if you grow up in a certain environment, if you are surrounded by people that have the same opinion, you will grow up with that. And we see that in Christian communities, for example. Like everybody who is surrounded by people with the same beliefs will have certain blind spots. And I don't even mind Nicola Sturgeon being a radical feminist. I mind having a radical feminist as the leader of the country. There should be politicians that hold these strong views. With that. But they shouldn't have the whole power.
Yeah, it was clear Nicola Sturgeon is a female supremacist.
Yes.
The way she speaks, she thinks that the world would be a better place if more and more women were doing more and more things, but we're running everything. That would be better. But I think I agree with Nicola Sturgeon. I think there's academics in universities who really are genuinely Marxists. They'd be quite open about it. But the ethos that they promote, a lot of other people take it on board and run with it, despite the fact that they don't actually accept or don't quite understand or whatever, that the real drive behind it. And I think that's that's like most of the people in the Scottish Parliament I'd put in that bracket, that they've been swept along with it because they haven't, for whatever reason, they haven't been able to take a step back, assess it critically for themselves, weigh it up against alternative philosophies. They're just swept along with the flow.
I would say that 90% of the Scottish people don't hold the same mindset that Nicola Sturgeon does, but they don't realize it because because people of this side just talk about compassion and talk about certain trigger words that sound very, very nice.
Yeah.
But if you really talk to people in their everyday life and you dismantle these ideas and ask, well, do you really want this kind of sex education in school? They were like, oh no, I didn't know that was going on. Or if you say, like, it's the same with, for example, the huge welfare state. If you tell people, well, don't you think it would be better to encourage people to go to work and do something for themselves? Most people in Scotland will say, well, a lot of young people are bloody lazy. They should just work harder. But if they hear, oh, we should increase benefits because poor single mothers and stuff like that, it pulls on their heartstrings. So what this, like the social justice warriors and Nicola Sturgeon and people on the left side, they manipulate people's compassion. And some of them might do it in a nefarious way, in a malicious way. I think a lot of them are really convinced that's the right way forward. But if you constantly give people something, they won't be able to take responsibility for their own lives. And I think that's what we see, an ever increasing laziness in people and people not stepping up their game. It's very harmful for especially for young people.
So where would you describe yourself as economically? Center, right, left?
Very libertarian, I would say. I never wanted much from the government, and I was happy to participate in the government. So I was happy to pay taxes because I believe in a country, and I think there needs to be a government that looks after people that really need it, and we need roads and all of this. And so I never had a problem paying taxes. I never wanted, even when I was really struggling, I never wanted to get something out of the government. This, during the lockdown, it's the first time that that I want money from the government. I'm going to take everything I can because I disagree with parts of the lockdown and I disagree with the government. And it's the first time where I'm saying, well, you want to give me money? I will not say no to this.
Mm-hmm. I think with the issue of benefits, I think it's a really difficult issue because while we do want to motivate people to go to work, I mean, there's this idea that there's some jobs in Scotland that you just can't expect people to do, or you can't expect people to travel. You expect people to come from Poland to work in a hotel in the Highlands, but it's unreasonable to expect someone in Glasgow to go and work in a hotel in the Highlands. I think that's all wrong. But on the other hand, if you are going to avoid cases where people are really struggling through no fault of their own, it's just really hard because cases are so individualized. Trying to deal with it through a national system with huge bureaucracy, I think it's a very difficult problem for the government.
I think there needs to be a system because otherwise people are being overlooked. But I think that's really something that used to be part of the job of the church, looking after people or communities. But the bigger communities become, especially in cities, people are being overlooked very easily. So I do understand that there needs to be some kind of welfare system, but the ones that can work should be encouraged to do what they can. But I think, and even if you're in a wheelchair, if you get money from the government, I think you should try to give something back. And even if it's just like being on the phone, talking to some neighbors, some elderly people that are lonely, and I think we should look out for each other a bit more. And I think government gives you money, you should give something back. And even if it's just cleaning the beaches or cleaning the city, because I mean, the Scottish cities, they are really dirty.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, return to our theme. So the development of your thoughts.
Yes.
So how did things move on?
During my weird journey, during being a porn actor, well, first being German Mr. Leather, and we talked about that before in the last interview, I used this title for advertising against promiscuity and against drugs. So pretty much everything I represented with the title, I was actually criticizing politely through my title. And so I was almost like a Trojan horse in some ways. And one of the biggest movements where I could say I'm just not on the left was Antifa. I went to demonstrations that were against racism, and there was Antifa, and I was dressed in black and like shaved head, and I looked like one of the Antifa people, and I had to turn around and leave because I did not want to be associated with this hateful part of the left. And especially in the recent years, I would say it started with moving to Scotland. While I moved to Scotland and building a house, and let's face it, building a house, starting your life, your business, that is connected with huge responsibility. As soon as you take responsibility, when you have to pay taxes, when you invest into your community, I think you realize these are traditionally conservative things to do. And the older you get, the more conservative you become anyways, I think. Let's look at the Scottish Family Party. I'm not a natural match for the Scottish Family Party, but the Scottish Family Party is the only opposition in Scotland that highlights family values and that opposes extreme liberalism. And I'm a liberal person, but it's going too far, and it's destroying society. So I have to take a stand, and I have to stand with the conservative silent minority, majority, and to say, and because I'm bisexual and because of my lifestyle choices, I'm one of the few people who can actually stand up and say to straight people, no, it's enough. You can criticize certain things. That doesn't make you a homophobe. Being homophobic makes you a homophobe. If you criticize promiscuity, that's not being a homophobe. That's having values, and you're allowed to have values. And so I'm a conservative now, and in some ways I'm more conservative than you, I would say. In other parts, or let's say I'm more outspoken because I can be more outspoken.
Yeah, it's interesting, the term conservative. Apparently, it only exists in the English-speaking world. Apparently, but the problem with it is in Britain is it's associated with a political party.
Yeah,
which isn't actually very conservative or conservative at all.
Yeah.
So
when I
people,
say
it's quite an alien term. How would you define it?
I would say traditional. I would define conservative by conservating things that are good, looking at what you had, saying these things were good. Let's celebrate them. Let's keep them alive. I'm open to changes, but these changes have to be done carefully and with an appreciation of the positive aspects, what we had and what we should still have.
Yeah, the things we have, traditions, culture, etc., it's often been refined over hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Through a process of trial and error, survival of the fittest ideas, if you like. So before we throw something overboard, we do need to think very carefully about it. But even without the conservative element, even if I didn't have any sort of special leaning towards conservative what's good in society, just looking at the evidence of things as they are often leads to the conclusion that it's best to be promoting aspects of society that have been in it for hundreds of years. So even if they're invented yesterday, I mean, if marriage was invented last week, and still you could see it was going to be just as effective, then I'd be saying, yeah, this is the way we need to go. But it's just innovations like that are quite few and far between, because these are really complex institutions, complex elements of culture to deal with. So to start playing with them, things that play out over hundreds of years, it's very sensitive.
I think when we look, being conservative means looking back, looking at our past, and also cross-culturally looking at what benefited society, what benefited humanity. And because there are things in the past that didn't benefit us, like war, for example, so we try to avoid that. And war is a cultural norm. It existed all the time, but it came at huge costs, and we assessed that war wasn't good. But marriage exists in every culture in one way or the other. Commitment exists in every culture one way or the other. And two genders, male and female, exists as norm in all cultures and has existed all the time. There have always been exceptions to the rules, but these exceptions were seen as exceptions. They were celebrated at times, but they were celebrated as exceptions, and they were never supposed to be normalized. And my conservatism, I'm very open, and I'm very inclusive to people that are not the norm. I just don't think that the norm should be thrown overboard just because some cultural Marxists or some French philosophers came up with wacko ideas in the 60s and 70s and said, let's start a cultural experiment. It's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, I think in terms of a lot of some moral issues, if you like. I mean, in the society such as ours, people make their own decision how they're going to live their lives.
Yeah.
And when it comes to politics, if a political party is going to come forward and say, right, our policy is we're going to have a law against such and such a thing, then you've brought that thing into the political arena.
Yeah.
If you're not intending to do that, whether or not a person such as myself might think, that this is right, this is wrong, or whatever, that doesn't actually matter to the politics. What matters with politics is the policies. So one person might think that a certain sort of behavior is immoral. Another person might think, well, I don't think it is. But they both might agree that there are various dangers associated with it, or that this is the way, that these are the policies that should be enacted in that area. But the problem at the moment is a lot of activists are really on the alert to hunt down the heretics. Yeah. And they're the ones who are really interested to know people's personal views about these things, rather than talking about the policies. So we've created an atmosphere in Britain where virtually all politicians, they're afraid to state their personal views. Or if they do, it's very apologetically, and they want to cover the tracks as soon as possible. Whereas these things actually should be irrelevant to politics. You talk about the policies.
I think they are correct to be afraid, unfortunately. I think if you voice your opinion, you can very easily be lose your job, be attacked, be deplatformed. Are counterexamples in the UK. In England, there's the MP Philip Davies, who is very outspoken in regards to men's rights, and he gets reelected. I mean, he's 1 in a million, so to speak, or 1 in 600.
Yeah.
But he gets reelected, so you can do it. But
do you think the Conservatives are playing a game with that? Do you think they think, right, we've got this fella here, it's a bit of a maverick, but there's quite a few people around Britain who really like him. And those people will watch him on YouTube or whatever, and he'll just help to keep that part of the electorate on board with the Conservative Party. People who disagree with him, well, they probably don't even know he exists.
Well, the thing is, he is being elected by his constituents. So
yeah, he's been elected because he's a Conservative, though. Probably a lot of the
Oh,
constituents don't even know about his men's right activism. But then the
okay.
Conservatives
Yeah.
would say, you know, we've got a pretty hardline feminist in another constituency. And that's good because then she can go on YouTube and try and keep that part of the electorate on board.
Yeah.
So there's sort of playing a bit of a game to have people they know don't represent their views, but they're reaching out to particular groups.
That's
Do you
politics.
think that's cynical, or does it just happen by accident?
Well, why am I on this show, in this interview? Reason why I support the Scottish Family Party is because I can reach certain areas of the demographic that, for example, you can't reach, because you have to reach people with different aspects. Every party has to do that, and I think in a democracy it's incredibly important, because you have to reflect different views. But what is important that all the people in the party should have core values.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that is necessarily the case in all parties. There is a huge range of ideas in different parties, and obviously that leads to clashes. That's why you have a certain wing here, a certain wing here. I don't think that feminism and the Conservative Party should work well together. And I think that, for example, being pro-abortion and being conservative should not be a natural fit. So there are a couple of things where I'm like, are you really conservative? So I find that's why I like about the Scottish Family Party. I think that the opinions in the Scottish Family Party are very clear, and to me they are conservative in a very in a way that works well for me.
Something that a lot of people either willfully or genuinely, I'm not sure, but they don't get the subtle distinction between saying, for example, we want to give families the choice about how they structure their work childcare arrangements. So it's up to them instead of the government trying to force them down a particular route.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a letter about something like that in the Scotsman the other day. Inevitably, someone writes in the next day, you're telling women they need to know their place or whatever. I mean the editor of the Scotsman should have read that letter and looked at mine and thought, no, that's just nothing to do. That's just completely ridiculous. In the bin. But instead, that's what we get. But then that's just the way it's going to be. And I think some people, even genuinely, they don't pick up on the distinction initially, and they do assume that that's what you really think. So it's as though you're having to constantly go over basic things, explain that you don't think things that you actually think are so ridiculous. You think it's bizarre that you're having to explain it's not what you think. But to some extent, it's necessary.
Well, it's the same. I'm a men's rights activist, and every time I say I'm a men's rights activist, I have to explain myself that I don't hate women and that I'm for the rights of women as well. And it's bizarre. I don't understand where this comes from. It's like, oh, if I care about one thing, I must therefore hate the other thing. So let's say I run an animal shelter or an animal charity. Does that mean I hate humans? Or I really like dogs. Does that mean I have to hate cats? No.
Yeah.
It's that connection. It's like if you, for example, if you say we are working towards a future where not both parents have to work, they would see that as, oh, so you want the woman to be at home. It's like, did you actually listen to me? It does, like, what if the woman wants to work and the father wants to stay at home? It's just like the problem is right now parents don't have the choice. They can't stay at home. They have to work, and that's not how it should be.
This is speculation, but just let's hear what you think. So if we take someone now, let's say someone performing, a drag act in some club in Edinburgh, lifestyle very sexualized, etc. Do you think there's a fair chance that in their heart of hearts, when their head's on the pillow, they think to themselves, actually, this is not what I want?
It's a good question. I mean, I have been a performer, and I did like very extravagant performances in clubs, and there were moments where I would say I was in sync and I was an artistic performer and it was fine what I was doing. But in 80% of the times, I felt very bad. And so my performance was actually like, it had to do with fire, like burning myself. And there were actually quite a few situations where I performed in gay clubs on stage, and I looked down and I saw all the people on drugs and very hyper sexualized, and I was on stage and burning myself, and I knew that what I was doing, it was more self-flagellation, and I tried to purify the I tried to purify the demons of the room in my performance. It did make me feel good. I felt very exhausted afterwards. And a lot of the people viewing that, they might think, oh, what the heck is he talking about? But maybe you can compare it to people in Spain that walk down the streets and reenact the crucifixion and whip themselves. And going back to the drag queens that perform, the question that you have to ask all the time, are you happy? And not, are you happy in a superficial way? It's, are you content? Are you happy with how your life evolved? Do you have real friends? Real friends? Do you take real responsibility for your life? When you look back at life, do you think it was fun? Or do you think I have accomplished something in life? And I want to compare it with people that are overweight and that lose a lot of weight. A lot of overweight people say, oh, I'm happy and I love myself the way I am. But after they lost weight, they will say, oh, I'm so much healthier. I'm so much happier now. And I think a lot of people that are in a bad place will try to make this bad place look as nice as possible and pretend that they're happy. But if they would ask their soul, they're probably not. But it's an individual situation. I have found people that had very bizarre lifestyles, but they felt content in what they were doing, and they weren't broken, and they weren't drug addicts, and they didn't drink and stuff like that. They just had unusual lifestyle choices. I'm one of them. But then you have the vast majority are broken, and I don't think that being surrounded by other people that are broken will heal you. It will make you feel less alone for a while.
Yeah,
that's
the thing I've noticed sometimes with the drug users, illegal drug users, in quite a few cases they'll be quite sort of aggressive, cocky, dismissive, scathing about people who suggest they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, and that's one phase. Then it seems to be there can be like a switch flicked, and then the other stage is, society is not doing enough to help me. I need support. I need this. Please help me. I've got this terrible problem. So I go straight from one to the other. And I imagine that pattern is the same in lots of roads that are ultimately not going to be positive for people. There's a phase when it seems great, or people are convincing themselves that it's great, but then there can be some point where it falls.
We all have these tendencies of criticizing in other people what we identify as a problem in ourselves. And if we see somebody who lives let's call it a virtuous lifestyle, and we don't live this lifestyle, we will be dismissive, we will be sarcastic, make fun of them, because they unwillingly, they put up a mirror and show us what we are doing wrong. and show us our flaws, and we don't like that. And I think we all are guilty of that at one point. As I said, we are all sinners and we are all flawed. But ideally, we recognize that, oh, actually what I hate in this other person, or what I criticize in the other person, is something that I identify in myself, either as a problem or something that I suppressed in myself.
Yeah. I was reading a book last week about Victorian Britain, and part of it was talking about what they call the cult of respectability, where people were just so desperate to be shown a respectable front.
Yeah.
So whatever happened, covering it up was the number one priority. So it resulted in quite a lot of hypocrisy, because people would make a huge effort to appear to be doing the right thing, even though that wasn't actually the case. But on the other hand, it had a really positive side, in that it encouraged people to actually do the right thing. So I think in Victorian Britain, particularly late Victorian Britain, I mean, this was out of control and it had gone too far.
Yeah.
But I would argue at the moment it's maybe not there enough. A bit more of a cult of respectability, or whatever you want to call it.
I agree. I found some really good videos, like Christian videos from America, and I felt that they really got the balance right, where they highlighted behaviors that are not ideal, but they didn't judge the people. They said, they pretty much said, this behavior might not lead you to happiness and wholeness, and we are here to tell you that, but it's your choice to change your behavior, and we will support you anyways. And I think that's the right way forward. It's giving people options, also options to do something stupid, but telling them, we think it's stupid and we will support you in not doing it.
Yeah, the trial and error approach to life that some people of very liberal disposition seem to be suggesting doesn't actually work. Life's too short to go by a trial and error system. You need wisdom, you need guidance, you need rails or whatever to run on in order to avoid some dangers.
I think we all know that there's a part in life, especially when you're adolescent, where many people might try things that an adult probably wouldn't do anymore. And I think it's normal that people go through this phase, but they should go through this phase well equipped with the wisdom of elders telling them of the dangers. Because if you don't tell them how dangerous it is what they're doing, they can't make informed decisions. They might not follow what we suggest. They should at least know right from wrong before they choose one of the two sides.
Yeah, I think with teenage rebellion, they need to know what they're rebelling against.
Yeah,
and then if they need to know what they can be welcomed back into, I suppose.
And they also need something to rebel against, which is the conservative views of the parents. But if the parents are even more liberal than the children, if teachers are more liberal, if the politicians are more liberal, if the politicians say, oh, we value the opinions of the children equally to the opinion of an adult, it's like, no, because you don't have the life experience, and the children actually need the guidance of adults to form an opinion before they can start to build to assess things based on knowledge.